Hey Wargamers, welcome back to the channel Death from Above Wargaming. I'm Aaron and I am back yet again, continuing with our Summer of Battlytics. So this was another very popular design that our patrons wanted to review in our Summer of Battlytics experience. This one, another one in the Kickstarter, another clan mech. Very excited to do this one. This is the Warhammer IIC. It's devastating. This thing's awesome. So basically, I guess when the clans left, they had a bunch of Warhammers, and they were like, we're going to make this thing better. So they added 10 tons. It's like when you pull up to the, to the light in your F-150, and then the dude in like the Ram with the lift kit pulls up next to you, and he like looks down, and you're like, blah, blah, blah. That's what happens when like an Inner Sphere Warhammer like stands next to a clan Warhammer. They just made it bigger and put truck nuts on it. So it's got just devastating weaponry, 2 ERPPCs, a whole bunch of medium pulse lasers, and then a short-range missile pack for good measure. This thing is, it's not cheap. It's a very expensive mech in terms of battle value, but it has been around for quite some time, and it's a design that persists into the Ill Clan era. It is just an iconic mech, so very cool to see this one. And the exciting thing is, as you do get into the later eras, it's actually available to Inner Sphere factions as well, so they can reclaim the bigger and badder Warhammer for themselves. But let's dive in. Let's see how this one's going to do, guys. Stay tuned. Warhammer IIC coming right up. Alright guys, here we are, Warhammer IIC. So like all second line clan mechs, this is just like the standard one. There's like a, Warhammer standard, then 2, then 3, then 4. It's a bunch of different variants, if you will. So the interesting thing here, I made the joke about the truck nuts. This is an 80-ton mech. So standard Inner Sphere Warhammer, 70 tons. They made it 80 tons. The battle value is 2570. Like, it's almost 1,000 more, actually more than 1,000 over the standard, Succession Wars era Warhammer. That's not cheap. That's serious points. It's an assault mech. It was produced in 2829 for those of you that are interested. And as I had mentioned, it persists all the way into the Dark Age Ill Clan era, where Inner Sphere factions start having this mech be available to them, so you could take it in an Inner Sphere force, which is kind of cool. So the movement profile on this thing is 4/6, same as the regular Warhammer that we all know and love, except this thing has 40 dissipation, so it's got 20 double heat sinks. It's an insane amount. But it does have, again, twin ERPPCs. Those things get hot real quick. In terms of equipment, it's a standard fusion engine, which I love that. It does have endosteel and ferrofiber, so it's got the right combination of goods. It does have 12 tons of clan ferrofibers. This is 230 points of armor. This is rivaling some of the biggest and meanest mechs that we know. I think like King Crabs and Atlases are like in the 270s, 280s. So 230 is a substantial amount of armor. It gives me makes my Zeus very envious, to say the least. 93.1% armor coverage is very good. Now this thing, again, as you know, has giant PPCs instead of hands. It's a good trade. Backing up the PPCs, it's got 4 medium pulse lasers. Like 2 wasn't enough. They had to go with 4. So there's 2 medium pulse lasers in the left, 2 medium pulse lasers in the right torso. Oh, and it's got another one in the head. So it's 5 medium pulse lasers. Wow, 5 medium pulse lasers. That's a lot. And it has an SRM-6 in the right torso. Nothing special about that. Not a streak. No Artemis or anything like that. Just a standard old SRM-6. So it's got 1 ton of ammo, 15 rounds, more than enough for a normal game. And that covers, that's in the right torso. And of course that's covered by a clan case in this particular mech. I'm sort of nervous to go to the damage. I'm sort of afraid to see how much this thing will actually do. I mean, we looked at the Stone Rhino not long ago, and that thing was disgusting. This thing's even more disgusting. Can you believe it? Look at this thing. 375.8 points of baseline damage out of an 80-ton mech. Wow. And you can optimize that. So I optimized that, building up a little bit of heat to 393.2. That's a 4.6% gain. Look at the optimized chart for a moment. It is just a steady climb. As you get closer, this gets more disgusting. I mean, the pulse lasers are disgusting. The SRM's disgusting. Twin ERPPCs is disgusting. It is just a boatload of damage here. On the red line side, of course, the damage tanks, because you can build up a metric ton of heat with this thing right as soon as those medium pulse lasers get in range. And you start firing them at full effect, your heat goes from like 0 to 30 in basically 2 turns, which is crazy. But to be expected. Lethality. Let's talk about lethality here. So time to kill was what is it, 6.28. I'm actually surprised. I was kind of expecting with dual PPCs, I was expecting it to be a little bit lower, but I bet those medium pulse lasers are very, very splashy. The critical hits is pretty good, 3.17. Damage per hit, 8.12. So, not bad around the board there. Still pretty lethal. I think the PPCs, obviously, they're the decapitators. They're pulling up that average. The medium pulse and that SRM6 pulling down that average, but still, considering that spread, 8.12 it's a pretty good number. All right. So in terms of just overall assessment here, disgusting amounts of damage. It's still very lethal. I mean, I had higher expectations because I see it's almost hitting 400 points of optimized damage, but still, I mean, 6 point anything in terms of time to kill. Anything under like 8 is pretty good. But yeah, I mean, overall, this thing is it's an armor peeler for sure. I mean, this thing will melt targets. Let's take a look at the defensive side. I'm sure it's going to be good. We're talking standard fusion engine and, all that armor. Let's take a look. Actually, I was expecting a little bit better. It's still great, 90.3%. But I was honestly expecting like 97%. This thing is interestingly armored. So we didn't talk about this in the overview, but the CT for some reason is under armored. It's under average by, probably 5 to 6% of what it should be. The rear torso section is over 100% of what I would expect it to be. And that's based on your standard, your standard BattleTech progression, right? So if you look at, mechs, there's like a certain allocation that you really should have for those rear torsos combined. This one is way over that. There's way too much armor on the rear. Arms, legs, side torsos, head, right exactly where you'd want them to be. But for some reason, this thing is very afraid of things getting in the rear arc. I don't know why. All right, let's talk about mobility. So it's packed out leg crits, which I love. I mean, if I'm building a custom design mech, which of course with, some Omni mechs you can't do this, but with other mechs and including second line mechs, right, you can kind of be a little bit more flexible with how you move the crits around. You'll pack out those legs. There's no reason not to. If you've got extra heat sinks floating around and you're not protecting ammo with them like a cheese ball, stick them in the legs, right? So I think it's always great when a stock design has that double heatsink right in the leg there, because it keeps those motive hits down. So the thing starts at a +2. The average target mod over 10,000 sims was 1.96. So very, very good. So it's barely seeing any degradation on average. Towards the late turns in the game, you do see a 0.2 degradation. And I mean, that's just going to happen. But overall, I think this thing is pretty solid. Now, in terms of survivability, what did we see the most deaths? It's CT. Look at that, 7.2%. So, you talk about what kind of difference like a few extra pips makes on the center torso. It's a lot. Look at the engine deaths, 2.5%. Remember, it's a standard fusion engine. That means it's getting internal on the CT and killing the mech that way. So basically, 100% of your kills are attributed to damage coming through that center torso. You gotta armor that thing. There's no reason. I would take armor off the legs. I would even take armor off the arms. That CT and that head, those are the things, that are most important to me. followed by the side torso. In fact, the rear is the kind of thing I would leave hovering at 75%, because I don't care. If you're in my rear arc, I'm going to turn around and shoot you, or torso twist and use my ERPPC and, feed you 15 damage down your throat. Like, it's not a big deal to take a couple of shots in the back, unless, you're grossly outmaneuvered, which, if you are, that's not the mech's fault. So anyway, as I always say, I digress. Let's take a look at the efficiency. The efficiency rating on this thing blows my mind. 10.5. Guys, it's over 10. So this is like in that Direwolf A legendary category of stupid mechs that your opponents will hate you for playing. No, I'm just kidding. This is a fantastic mech. Your opponent should still hate you for playing it, though. This thing is really, really good. It hits all the time because it's got tons of pulse lasers. It's got ERPPCs, which are absolutely brutal. You're opening a ton of holes, gaping holes in the armor, and then just spraying a barrage of medium pulse and SRMs. You're finding crits, you're delivering damage, you're getting kills. This thing is very, very strong. Even though it's super expensive, it's an amazing, amazing mech. And what's interesting, I'll digress again, the Marauder 2C, which I don't know if we've looked at it yet on the channel. I think it's on BattleTech.com. That's another one that's just absolutely disgustingly powerful. So it's really cool to see these, these inner sphere designs like reimagined in clan form, and see them, just so devastatingly competitive, even more so than the Omni-Mechs. All right. Anyway, yeah, I mean the 80-ton comparative Omni-Mech would be a gargoyle. I don't think any gargoyle variant comes anywhere close to this. Although I have not looked at the crazy one, the J. Have I looked at the J? Maybe I did look at the J. But there are some crazy new gargoyles in the rec guides, which are very cool, by the way. Those might be able to compete. But the original, like the original gangster, like, A through D and the Prime, like, nowhere near these numbers. So, all right, effective damage by gunnery. Where do you want to play this thing? So it has a fairly mediocre gunnery sensitivity. You can see this thing climbs aggressively from 9 to 10.5, gunnery 4, gunnery 3, gunnery 2, and then sort of levels out. But let me underscore something. It's a 9.19 at gunnery 4. That means you can play this thing with the worst clan pilot or bondsman known to mankind, and it will still outperform the majority of mechs on the battlefield. That says something. Now keep in mind, if you're at gunnery 4, you're not going to hit a lot with those ERPPCs. You're relying mostly on the medium pulse lasers. So maybe that's a good, sort of a good thing to do if you're in an urban environment or a terrain-rich environment where you're not going to be getting off a lot of long-range shots. But if you're looking at open fields, deserts, lunar maps, things where you can actually get those ERPPCs across the board, putting a gunnery 2 pilot in this, you're going to see a nice ROI. All right, so let's talk about threat and roles. Speaking of where and how to play this thing. So to me, there are only two ways that I think, after looking at these charts, only two real ways I would play this mech. One, I want to get it across the battlefield, and I want to get it in close. That's that brawler role. It's not really fast enough to me to be a cavalry mech, right? Cavalry and brawler being different because cavalry, I'm trying to get from point A to point B, and I might be trying to get from point B to point C. I need that speed to get to where I want it to be very quickly. A brawler, I'm just looking for this thing to stick in with somebody and take it down and then try to get to the next closest target, right? It does not have the mobility to be, let me get you from one objective to the next objective to the next. It does have the mobility to hunt down a king crab or an annihilator, or a direwolf and get in close and mess it up really good. I would also put it in a vanguard role. People are going to be naturally terrified of this mech, especially after this BattleTech review. And so putting it front and center, having it run up the gut, draw fire. Again, it's still got a 90% survivability. Just hope they don't hit center torso a lot. And I think this thing will do really well in that role. I wouldn't put it anywhere else. You can't really put it in a fire support role. The medium pulse and SRM, too valuable. Can't really put it in a skirmisher role. It's not fast enough. Obviously, Picket doesn't really make sense for this mech. And then, you know, we talked about cavalry. So, I don't know. I think Vanguard Brawler, that's all I would do with this mech. Look at the threat. Peak Alpha Strike, 77 points of damage. That's if everything hits at 9 inches. Now, what I want to draw your attention to, though, is at that point of damage, right? Peak Alpha Strike, 77, it's 9 inches, right? Your peak ACD, right? That's irregardless of heat. Like, you fire everything, you roll the dice. What could you possibly, like, what are you most likely to do damage-wise? It's 65.7 at 3 inches. So if you're point blank range, you know, 3 inches or less, and you fire everything, you're likely going to do about 66 points of damage to a mech. That's devastating. That's a lot. That is an incredible amount of damage. The downside is you've got 5 medium pulse lasers. They're likely going to be hitting different locations in Classic. In Destiny, obviously, you can group some of that up. You can really carve things up there. But, you know, I still think this thing is, you know, it's devastating. As you're closing on your target, again, we talked about this a little bit earlier, blowing open holes with those ERPPCs, and then you're just feeding SRMs and medium pulse lasers and generating those crits. So very, very cool. Outside of, you know, 11 inches, this thing, I'm sorry, 12 inches, this thing really is not, it's not that scary. It's got a couple of ERPPCs. It's like every clan mech has ERPPCs. Tom and I joke about this all the time. Everybody's got an ERPPC in a clan mech. Having a couple, it's okay. It's got good heat sinks. You can fire them both and move. But really, when those medium pulse come into play, that's where your threat starts to go through the roof. When that SRM6 comes into play, it goes up a little bit higher. But again, your SRM6 not your bread and butter. Those medium pulse lasers, that's where the moneymaker is. When we look at the firing arc, the great thing is those PPCs are arm mounted, so you can reach out into your rear arc and fire with a torso twist. You also have very nice, just natural arc of fire. The front is where it's at, though. I mean, just keep your enemies in front of you, and you will core them out. Talking about ACD cap, we've talked about this before. This is, you know, how much the alpha strike is, the maximum, and then the difference between your, you know, your peak ACD, and it's 85.3%. It's pretty high. It's very good. All right, so let's talk about just some recap things. When I think about the Warhammer IIC, after looking at these numbers, just the biggest thing that jumps out at me is the insane amount of damage that this thing is capable of delivering. 393.2 on the benchmark. It's got to be one of the highest we've done. I'm struggling to think. I know there were a couple others we've done that were very high. I mean, the Stone Rhino is one of them, but it was not. I don't think it was up this high. I'm struggling to think of any mech that hit this number. This might be the all-time winner. So that says something. And remember that ACD, just to underscore, this is your average calculated damage. This factors in the probability to hit, right? So, you know, if you have a 50% chance to hit and you've got a 10 damage weapon, you know, the Battlytics engine says your ACD is 5, right? 50% of 10, right? So because the pulse lasers are so reliable at hitting, I mean, a -2 is, it's huge. It's a massive bonus. Yeah, I mean, that's going to drive that damage up, and you've got 5 of them. So very, very good there. Time to kill, 6.3, still very good. Again, I'm surprised it's not lower, but 6.3 is still very, very good. Possibly spoiled, again, by the Cauldron Born and the Stone Rhino there. Survival rate, very strong. Movement, mediocre, but, you know, holds its own. Doesn't see a lot of degradation. Efficiency is sensational. This is another one of those excellent bang for buck mechs. You will pay out the nose for it. And it's interesting, you know, we'll talk a little bit about lance design if you'll have me. You know, I was actually talking to somebody the other day on Discord about lance design and sort of the importance of putting low point clan mechs in your force, right? And these are, when I say low point, I mean things that are like 2,000 or less, like the Cauldronborn, right? Like the Vulture C, right? These things are still potent mechs, but they cost a few hundred less, and they allow you to field more mechs. There is definitely something to be said about fielding more targets and spreading those weapons across multiple mechs versus putting all of your eggs in one basket. So while this thing is absolutely devastating, you know, if you're going to spend 3,500 points on it, you know, after you look at your piloting and gunnery upgrades, you know, is that worth it? It's got to be contextualized in how much BB you're playing. If you're playing a 10,000 BB match, you know, maybe that's not worth it. You know, if you're playing an 8,000 BB match, it's certainly not worth it. If you're playing a 25, all right, you know, now we're talking, right? So you got to think about, you know, what you're willing to spend on this particular mech in the context of the total lens. If you're playing, you know, an Assault Star against an Assault Star, you know, Comstar level 2 or whatever, this thing absolutely is a mech I'm going to put in there as much as possible. I think it's fantastic. So that said, love the Warhammer 2C. I love the model. I like how, you know, it still looks like a Warhammer, but it's bigger, it's meatier, right? And if you put it next to the regular old Warhammer there, I mean, you can see the difference and sort of that. I don't want to call it alien, but there's something different about the clan design, right? The clan streamlining, the way it looks. It's very cool. I think they did a really nice job on the resculpt. But anyway, guys, I'm done. I'm out. So don't forget to subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. And of course, if you want to get more involved with the channel, you can head on over to Patreon. We've got 3 tiers. Our green tier, I believe it is $1. Our regular tier is $5. Our veteran tier is $10. Each one of those comes with a whole variety of different benefits. You get in on conversations and polls, and the veterans have challenges. That regular tier gets access to our digital toolkit, so there's a lot of really neat stuff out there. Also, guys, if you're looking for minis, you're looking for paints, you're looking for books, you're looking for anything BattleTech related, head on over to Aries Games and Minis. He's got a great service, great prices, so definitely check out Derek over at Aries Games and Minis. Very, very good guy over there. So, guys, again, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this Wave 2 Summer of Battlytics mech review on the Warhammer 2C. This is a really, really cool mech. But, of course, stay tuned. More on the way. Always good stuff coming from Death from Above Wargaming. Guys, have a good night.